Have you ever wondered what a double-barreled question was? Double-barreled questions, much like leading questions, should be avoided if you want your survey to yield the best results. In today's video, we'll explain what exactly a double-barreled question is, show you some examples of them, and how you can best avoid them. I'm Sissy from Jotform, and let's jump right into the video. To get the best results from your questions, both in surveys and otherwise, you should take care to phrase them correctly. You've probably already heard that you should avoid things like leading and ambiguous questions, but there is another aspect of a poorly phrased question that is often overlooked. This other culprit, the double-barreled question, often causes participants to struggle to come up with the best response. To best understand why these questions can be confusing and yield inaccurate results, let's first address what double-barreled questions are. A double-barreled question is an informal fallacy that occurs when you ask two different questions, but only allow for one response. It appears most commonly in courtrooms, research, and surveys, and while it can be used intentionally, it often occurs entirely by accident to the detriment of your results. When this happens, in case of a survey, the person generally answers one of the two questions, meaning you have no data on how they would respond to the second question. One way to weed out these questions is to search for where you've used the word "and," but this method isn't foolproof, as "and" can be used in a properly formulated single question. Double-barreled questions can be just as frustrating in other situations, like in court trials. They can be used to trick witnesses into unintentionally revealing information. For instance, a witness might be asked, "As you approached the intersection, did you look down, change the radio, and then look up to see an oncoming car?" Of course, any attorney would object, as this is a double-barreled question. Double-barreled questions can also occur when there is a lack of proofreading, such as in this example. Should the government spend more money on education and less money on military funding? Though you may agree with both parts of the question, you could instead believe that the government should spend more on education, but not spend less on military funding. Meaning if you were to answer yes, the results would be inaccurate. So instead, the two questions should be separated to allow for an accurate opinion to be provided for each. Another example would be the question, how well do you get along with your manager and coworkers? This question forces you to lump your feelings about your coworkers in with your feelings about your manager. If you felt exactly the same way about both, there would be no issue, but it's likely that this is not the case. You may love your boss, but you find yourself at odds with one of your coworkers. So once again, it would be better to ask these as two separate questions. Double-barreled questions are also extremely common in agree or disagree questions, like in this example. Agree or disagree, the subway should be free and more reliable. As you can only agree or disagree, you're left unable to demonstrate your true opinion. If you want a more reliable subway, but still believe riders should pay a fare, then you may not be sure how to respond accurately. Of course, posing each of these questions separately from one another would be the better route to go. Here's an example of a double-barreled question that does not use the word "and," but still limits how someone can respond. Are you a hard-working employee who is never late? While this is a good question if you're only looking for an employee who is both, it could skew your responses if you're actually trying to determine if being a hard-working employee and being on time always go hand in hand. Phrase the question separately to yield more useful results. If you want the best results possible, you should do your best to avoid double-barreled questions, in addition to leading, assumptive, and confusing questions. Remember, never try to trick people to get the responses you want. Though this is the least common scenario, it's still possible, and as we saw in the courtroom example, could be problematic. Clear questions lead to authentic, truthful responses. Always proofread and ask a second and third person to review your questions to ensure they're clear and straightforward. And do a trial run for your questions to determine that the results will make sense for the question you plan to ask. Before I head out, let's review the video. A double-barreled question occurs when you ask two different questions but allow for only one answer. This causes confusion and can skew your results. Double-barreled questions are common in courtrooms, research, and surveys. They are often accidental, though occasionally used intentionally to trick someone. Generally, if your question contains the word "and," double-check that it's an appropriate usage and not a double-barreled question. Ask others to review your questions, proofread, and run a few trials before implementing your questions for the best possible results. Again, I'm Sissy from Jotform, and thanks for joining us today. Take care.